Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the work of a really radical thinker, Ivan Illich. And this is a guy who didn't just question our answers. He went after the fundamental assumptions, the very axioms our modern world is built on.
Okay, so this quote, it really gets to the heart of how he thought. It's a direct shot at an institution we just accept without question, right? For Illich, these huge modern institutions like schools, they've basically become the new church. They demand our faith, they demand our obedience, and they're the ones defining what's real for us.
So Ivan Illich, he was a thinker who was really against what we call progress. You know, that constant drive for more stuff, more consumption, more speed. He saw it as a total trap. A trap that was actually destroying the very things that make life worth living. Things like our own autonomy, our communities, and our personal freedom.
All right, let's really get into it with his core concept. He called it counterproductivity, and this is a wild idea. He's saying that our biggest institutions, schools, transportation, even modern medicine, they don't just have some unfortunate side effects. No. He argued that once they grow past a certain size, they start to systematically produce the exact opposite of what they were designed to do.
And the first place he really applied this idea was to an institution we all know very well, school. He basically said, look, as schools get bigger, as their budgets swell, they don't get better at teaching, they actually get better at producing ignorance and conformity, not real, genuine learning. Pretty crazy, right?
So here's that paradox in action. Schools say they're there to educate everyone and create equality, but Illich argued that their real function becomes something else entirely, to certify most people as failures. Think about it. They create this social pyramid where only a tiny fraction at the top succeed, and everyone else is taught to just accept their place. They're basically branded as failures for life.
And how does this happen? Well, he called it the hidden curriculum. He said this is way more important than what you learn in math or history class. The hidden curriculum teaches us to be passive consumers. We're taught that learning isn't an activity you do, it's a product you receive from experts. That your own curiosity isn't enough. You have to rely on the institution to tell you what's worth knowing.
So, what was his solution? It wasn't just, let's make schools a little better. No, his goal was a complete, radical flip of how we think about learning. He imagined something called learning webs. Basically, open networks where anyone could find people to learn from, find mentors, find resources, all on their own terms. The idea was to take back education and make it a joyful, self-directed thing again. Okay, so this logic of counterproductivity, it doesn't stop with big institutions like schools. It also applies to the tools we use, the very things that shape our physical world. Let's take a look at how he used this idea on something as simple as every day as a city street. To really get this, Illich tells this amazing story about the streets of Mexico City and what they used to be like. We're talking about a time before the car was king. Back then, the streets were this vibrant, lively, shared space.
He called this space a commons, and it was a place for everything, for community, for selling things, for just living. People literally lived in the street. It was a space that was shaped by the people who were there, not just a hallway to get from point A to point B. You could almost think of it as an extension of their own homes.
But then, progress happened. Mass transportation came along, and these streets were completely transformed. They stopped being a place for people, and they became a resource for machines.
And just like that, the commons was destroyed. The street was no longer a living space. It was just a resource for circulation, for traffic. Suddenly, human beings became obstacles. Think about that. People became the problem. And our own natural ability to just walk around and get places was crippled by this new dependence on cars. This brings us to another one of Illich's really big ideas, the search for what he called convivial tools. Convivial is basically the opposite of one of those industrial, counterproductive tools we've been talking about. A convivial tool is simple. It serves you. You don't serve it.
And here's the perfect comparison, a bicycle versus a car. The bicycle, Illich would say, that's a perfect convivial tool. It just takes your own energy and makes it go further. Almost anyone can use one. The car, on the other hand, is an industrial tool. It controls you. It demands massive amounts of energy, and it creates a world of scarcity.
Suddenly there's not enough time, not enough space, not enough clean air.
So this same logic, this pattern of industrial tools taking over, it doesn't just reshape our streets, it actually extends right into our own bodies through the modern medical system. For Illich, this was another classic example of counterproductivity.
And here's another one of his claims that just stops you in your tracks. He argued that modern medicine, once it gets too big and too intense, actually starts to generate more illness than it cures. And he wasn't just talking about mistakes in the hospital. He was talking about how it fundamentally changes how we even think about our own bodies.
He took this medical term iatrogenesis, which just means illness caused by doctors, and he blew it up. He said there's also social iatrogenesis. That's when medicine makes us dependent on it. And even worse, cultural iatrogenesis. That's when it destroys our ability to deal with things like pain, suffering, and even death on our own terms, with dignity.
So you start to see the pattern, right? Our own natural abilities, the ability to learn, to heal ourselves, to build things, to care for one another, they're systematically taken away from us. They're turned into needs. And once they're a need, well, that becomes a product, a commodity, that you have to buy from some big professional institution.
And at the end of the day, what does this do? It completely disempowers us. Things that used to just be part of normal life, part of being in a community, are now turned into these huge problems that only a certified expert with a fancy tool can possibly solve.
Okay, so if modern progress is this big trap, if it's a system designed to make us dependent and unhappy, and what's the alternative? Is there even a way out of this?
Now, Illich didn't have some simple 5-step plan to fix everything. He wasn't that kind of thinker. His alternative was more like a fundamental change in direction, a conscious choice to start favoring tools and institutions that work on a human scale, things that build up our autonomy instead of creating more dependence.
So what does that actually look like? It's not about throwing away all our technology and living in the woods. Not at all. It's about choosing a different kind of modern life, one where people are in the driver's seat, not the systems. It's about taking back the commons, whether that's our streets, our knowledge, or our own health.
So when you're faced with these gigantic, counterproductive systems that feel totally impossible to change, what do? Illich's advice wasn't to go out and start a revolution, not in the classic sense anyway. His advice was to just live differently, to be the alternative. His advice was as simple as it was profound. Be a flame in the darkness.
And so Illich leaves us with a question we really have to ask ourselves. Just look around at your own life. Think about everything from your smartphone to your job, and ask which of these things were supposed to be my tools, but have somehow become my masters. It's a question that really gets to the very heart of Illich's powerful and I think timeless challenge to our modern world.